Okay, we're going to do an instructional video on the bench press. Subject here is Zach. He's going to demonstrate the lifts as I talk him through a little bit. He's a fairly experienced lifter, so he has a pretty good idea of the terminology of things I'm talking about as we do this. Before we start, the bench press obviously is a pressing or pushing exercise. Relatively simple exercise to perform, but still one that we have to incorporate safety into first. Talk about a little bit the muscles engaged. We have the anterior deltoid, the chest or pectoral muscles, the triceps, back of the arm. Activities that primarily use the type of movement that was generated from a bench press would be any type of striking movement in football, anything, half of the movement in swinging a bat, passing a basketball, anything that requires propulsion or moving something or yourself away from an object. If we start in the bench press, basically it's for the most part a two-dimensional plane movement up and down, although we will demonstrate how we slightly arc the weight up a little bit once we start into that. We'll have Zach assume a position to start on the bench press. Notice he'll have 5 points of contact, his 2 feet, his hips are in contact with the bench, and his shoulders are in contact with the bench. That's his normal grip. He kind of automatically goes to there. We notice there's different areas on the bar where it's knurled, so you could get a good even spacing on the bar. He has a relatively, probably an average grip as far as spacing goes. Slightly wider than his shoulders is what we're looking for on a bench press. He has a fairly flat back positioning on the bench as it is right now. Some individuals like to what we call scrunch a little bit, in which he brings his hips and his shoulders closer together before he benches, shortens that distance between his hips and his shoulders, actually tilts the upper part, his upper chest, to where the pressing is actually of less distance, and you're somewhat stronger pushing almost in a decline position. We don't want to raise our hips. Sometimes we see some horrible bench where the hips are off the ground and the individual has got a real arch in the back. We want to avoid that as much as possible. Maintain a position where we can execute good form with the bench press. Spotting on the bench press, if it's extremely heavy, we can have a spotter on each side, moving up and down through bending our knees with the weight, as well as one main spotter in back that we typically have to begin with. When we start here, I'm going to have Zach preload the weight, which is just simply taking the pressure off of the bar and exerting enough pressure to tighten the muscles or flex the muscles to begin with. And then I'll lift the bar off for him in an overhand, underhand fashion. And then I'll just keep my hands around the bar, even though this isn't enough weight to really worry a lot about. I will continue the spotting technique to do a rep on the bench. Okay? So say when, Zach. Notice the bar goes down and then up and a slight arc to the back. His went fairly straight, and when he's done, I'll help him slide it back and re-rack the weight. One thing I failed to mention that we'll do it one more time to notice is the bar is lowered to align with the center of the chest, pushed back straight up or slightly back in an arch, and lowered and stopped at the nipple line or the center line of the chest. So we'll go one more time. Ready, up. One more time, down and touch the chest, and back up, and I'll take the weight, help him move it back. Pull it back against the uprights. It's a good bench because it has high uprights and it doesn't allow for a lot of moving the bar too far back or missing the uprights or the standards. One other thing that I failed to mention was the angle of the elbow to the body. I'll talk later a little bit about lever arms and what moment arms are. In the bench, the lever obviously is the elbow and the shoulder. That's where the action is moved. Let's look again one more time, Zach, on benching with the angle of the elbows to the body. Obviously, with the elbows way out or flared, that creates more tension on the shoulder joint. The ball and socket is a fairly fragile joint to begin with, so we want somewhat of a tighter angle with the elbow and the torso, which Zach does a pretty good job of. So we'll lift off. Ready to go. And we'll notice his bench press. His elbows are at about a good 35-40 degree angle with the that's good, with his body. as those elbows come into the body, we talk about moment arms, and we'll talk more about that when we do the squat, but the moment arm that we try to create with a heavier weight or a multi-joint exercise is as short as we can get it. Moment arm is basically the distance between the rotational or anchor point, such as the shoulder, and where the weight is. So if Zach were to stand up here, if Zach were to have a weight in his arm and he were to lift it straight out, this is the rotational part. Let's turn this way, Zach. This is the rotational part of his body. So the moment arm, where the weight there, is between here and here. If it was down a little further, the length of the moment arm between the rotational force is about here and here. If the arm is straight up, that's a long moment arm. It's from here to here, okay? So an activity or a movement or a skill or a lift that would create a long moment arm, as a general rule, we want to keep the weight less if the moment arm is long. So when we're bench pressing, and if we have the elbow out here, and this is the point of, although there are 2 points of flexion or 2 anchor points, if we push the weight this way, we lessen the moment arm, but the moment arm between here and here, if we turn back this way, is longer than if we have a 35 or 40 degree angle. That's less of a moment arm, so the potential damage to the shoulder is less, okay? That pretty well wraps it up as far as the technique of the bench.